Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Me, you have to take chances on things that aren't rational. I mean, if you're not battling inside, man, is this crazy or is this brilliant? If you're not battling with that at any point, then you're probably not scratching the surface of your brilliance. But how can the rebel coexist inside this matrix of control? I don't know if you guys realize it, but we're all on DMT right now. I'd rather be that mysterious guy that is misunderstood, that they're like, dude, I thought you were gonna blow it until you showed me the final product. And dude, I'm sorry I doubted you, and I'm glad I stuck with you. I know where I'm going with this. Even though you don't see it, I know where I'm going with it. So I needed to be able to stick up for myself. The conspiracy theorists your heart should go out to, because we've always been looked at as the shittiest part of society. Every word has meaning behind it. You got to bring out the colors of it. Hey, give up and your dreams will come true. No, I don't know that that's the case. You can make a film that is edited to the nines, great soundtrack, everything. But if the audience is like, so what? Like, the message is what lands. And I think if it doesn't wake you up to love, leave it alone. This is Ben Stewart, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Go to benjosephstewart.com. That's my website. You'll find all my content. I have a member section that I had to start because YouTube was starting to give me warnings for all of my content. I have a weekly show called Waking Infinity News. That's on my YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/benjosephstewart, and that's STEWART, you can find all of my YouTube content. I also do Thursday podcasts at 5 p.m. Eastern live. And but go to Ben Joseph Stewart. You'll find just about all my films. You'll find everything that's going on with me there, and you can even contact me there.
First thing I want to start off with today is one thing that you have said in a couple different interviews I've heard, and it really resonates with me because I had a similar message in an ayahuasca trip, was you create to empower. And I think that's a kind of good starting place. I just want to, was that always your purpose? I know you started with a band and you were trying to make a documentary, and that kind of went different ways, but was it always to empower, or did you have an experience that kind of got you there?
Yeah, I definitely had an experience that got me there. You know, I often today look back on those days, and I'm curious as to how I got to that moment as well. I remember all the moments leading up to it, but really I was in a band. I was in the military before that, and I wasn't really allowed to speak about what was happening in the world. And not that I was the type of guy to like be political or to try and talk about, you know, like my philosophies and my beliefs about the world, but more so than anything, I'm a rebel. I never liked people telling me what I can and cannot talk about. So as soon as I got out of the military, that was the first thing I started doing, was really just kind of talking about my views on the world. But it was at that time that, you know, to be blunt, I took mushrooms and I watched Zeitgeist. And it was the combination of the two, because I'd read a lot and I'd seen a lot about conspiracy before that. But nothing hit me quite like that moment where I realized, like, whoa, this dude, it was anonymous at the time. He didn't put out his name, you know, and Peter Joseph wasn't even his real name, but he didn't put his name in there like credits. You know, he didn't, in that film, he wasn't asking for money. He didn't ask for your email address or anything along those lines. It was just this, I want to give my art to you, the world, so you wake up. And that was how it hit me. It reached me in a way that no advertising or no other kinds of films really could. It was this, I put all this time and energy into a piece of art so you can hopefully take it to heart and wake up. That was what really set me on the path, and what made me a filmmaker was that moment where I realized he put a really good soundtrack to it. And I was like, he didn't just, it wasn't just this underground, like, you know, kind of slapped together from other people's films type of thing. He did it well, the way that he did it. So you could tell, you could sense his devotion in it. And for me, I was just like, the only thing that was lacking in that movie was kind of the element that you're talking about, that real empowerment. Because at the end of that movie, he, you know, he just said, like, the house of cards that was built by these bankers and these people, once you wake up to it, it'll topple over. And I just felt like that was not good enough. Like, that wasn't a good enough parable for me to feel really empowered. I wanted to do a film that expresses the darkness, but also shows, like, here is a way to conceptualize how much power a human has. So I did that with Esoteric Agenda, and people were like, I love the last 15 minutes of that film where you're just talking about human potential. Can you go deeper in that direction? So that led me to Kymatica, my second film, which was a lot more about collective psychology, consciousness, how to, you know, not just point the finger out there, but acknowledge that a lot of what we point the finger at is to escape the acknowledgement that there's something we could do if we were to accept responsibility. And most people I'm going to make this claim, most people, even though I haven't met most people in the world, it seems as if, like, most people, they don't want to accept accountability for things that they feel they wouldn't have done in those positions. Like, I wouldn't have been that kind of a banker, or I wouldn't have been this kind of a politician. And in a way, I feel like we make these excuses to say, I have no accountability. This is somebody else's problem, ergo they should clean up that problem. And it's my point only to point it out, only to point the fingers and who's to blame. They should be the ones cleaning up the mess. And I figured that's not a very empowering way to go. So as much as I never shied away from talking about what I perceive to be the problems out there, I always wanted to make it very clear that the solution is us. The solution is not them, them that we supposedly hate. Especially not if we're going to speak about them in terms of they are the problem. If we keep speaking about them in those terms, you know, when was the last time you were inspired to solve a problem simply because people are pointing the finger at you saying you're to blame? You know, usually that inspires us to defend ourselves, to come up with ways to say, no, this actually wasn't me. This is a part of the system I was born into as well. So that's kind of, you know, to me, it's kind of the Charles Eisenstein way of looking at, like, today, post 2020, in this very polarized world, especially the politically polarized world, there's a synergy between the left and the right that they don't seem to acknowledge, which is blame the other side. The other side is the core root of the problems that I feel afflicted by in the world. So it's them. So isolate and diagnose the singular problem and eliminate that problem, and then the world should be fine after that. And I just saw, no, we need to start making art that inspires us to acknowledge that it's not a blaming energy we need to come to the world with. It's actually more of, you know, acknowledge what is, acknowledge the playing field as it is, as jilted as it might be, and then acknowledge that, let's say the matrix of causality isn't like I'm 1 in 7 billion, therefore my power is commensurate to 1 out of 7 billion. It's a lot more than that. It's quite a bit more than that. And I think the evidence is also in, like, why do we keep saying that 1% of the population controls the other 99%? It's because we acknowledge that it's you have to adopt a certain amount of responsibility. And I'm not saying that, you know, if you psychologically adopt that responsibility, you'll be in the 1%. But what I am saying is that the math we do in our heads to tell us we're insignificant is not, it's missing some very valid information. And usually if we take a deeper look at it, it's not calling for us to be scared at the playing field. It's calling for us to look at it in a new orientation that most people don't look at it in. And that is, one human being can achieve so much, but that inspiration calls us to our higher self, whereas fear and blame calls us into our lower self. And really, if we're trying to create a more beautiful world, that's going to come more by accepting what is and moving forward as if, no, I really do have the solution. And I wish to put that forth in the world. To me, I do that through art.
So taking a step back, then, you mentioned you'd always kind of been a bit rebellious. So I'm curious, was that something that was in you even before your time in the military? And if so, how did that rebellion still lead you into the military?
Yeah, I definitely had the rebellious side before the military. So just a little bit of backstory is my father, his father, all the way back to the Mayflower, we were in the military, probably before that, where every single generation was in the military. So I didn't break that suit, but I did that because I was in a band in high school. All I wanted to do was, sing and write and make music. And I had this one freak out moment where I thought, man, if I'm an artist, I have to keep making art and people have to like it so much that a bunch of people have to buy it, right? Like if I have a $10 album, how many people have to buy my album for me to make enough to buy a house? And I started doing math in my head and kind of disobeying what I was just talking about. I was doing the math and I was disempowering myself, because many people do it. How did they do that? They probably achieved the goals of buying their houses and whatever else through their art form because they believed in themselves. But for that moment, I didn't believe in myself. And there was this one moment where my dad was telling me how a friend of his, so my dad was a military Black Hawk pilot, and he was telling me he had a friend who had made it fixed wing pilot, which just means a plane. And he worked for an airline and he flew twice a month and he was making $150,000 a year. So to me, I felt, well, if I go into the Air Force and I train to become a pilot, eventually I can get into that position where I'm only working 2 days a month and I can make $150,000 a year. And so that was my mind looking for the easy road to security. And so I disobeyed that inner rebel that knew what I wanted to do with my life. And I went into a direction instantly. As soon as I signed the oath, I signed the document and I raised my hand and I took the oath. I instantly regretted it. And I came home and I told my dad, like, I don't know if I want to do this. He was like, the time to think about that would have been 2 hours ago before you took the oath. He was like, we Stewarts, we don't put our word on something and then back out, especially not immediately. You got to see this one through. And so I did. For 6 years, I was in the military. But in that time, as soon as I got back from tech school after basic training, right after basic training, 9/11 happened, by the way, like 3 days after I got home from basic training. And the reason why I wasn't deployed immediately was because I hadn't done tech school yet. I went to tech school, I came home, and I instantly realized I need to get into a band. So I did, and that band turned out to be Hyrosonic, the band that you can find on Spotify now. And it was through that time that I think it was very valuable for me because I don't like being told. I don't like being told what to do or what reality is or anything along those lines. But in a way, that rebellious side of me caused me to lack a lot of discipline that the military actually gave me. So I actually did discover a lot about myself by being subordinate rather than just being a rebel. So that was super important for me. But as soon as they were waving $20,000 in front of my face to re-up for another 8 years, I was looking at $20,000, which, by the way, I'd never had more than like $3,000 or $4,000 to my name. But I was thinking like, okay, compulsory pay raises, very, cushy security if I toe the line with the military, or try to make it in one of the most difficult industries out there. And by that time, I already knew what the military was about. And I was like, I'm out. I'm going to do the band thing. And I did for the next 7, 8 years. I was the band I was in for 13 years, but maybe 4 or 5 of those years I was still in the military. At that time, I just went really hard. We started touring. We were on Lollapalooza with Jane's Addiction, A Perfect Circle, Audio Slave, Incubus, bands that I grew up listening to. We were on tour nonstop with really amazing bands. And then I learned the hard reality that like being in a band isn't what you think it is when you're 15. You know, there's an industry behind it. And if you're spreading that very non-existent money out with 5 people in the band, you know, we were touring with some amazing bands, but if you look at our bank accounts, you'd be like, oh, how quaint, you're in a garage band. That's how it felt. And so so then I had another freak out moment around 28, 29, where I was like, you know what, I don't want to be 40 and still trying to make it in a band. So I just left the band. I went out to California and I started trimming pot. And I met the woman of my dreams. She's my wife now. And we very quickly had a child. And that was when I realized, yeah, I really need to start making real money and have an actual bank account if I want to support this child. So it eventually led me to having children and realizing that like, it's almost like the military, like, no, you still got to somewhat play ball with this system of control in the world that you find yourself in. And so I guess where I'm going with this is I had to find how that rebel can coexist, because I can't stamp out the rebel, but how can the rebel coexist inside this matrix of control that I found myself in? And so I'm still discovering what that means, but I feel like I've made a lot more peace with it lately.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And then with the mushrooms and the Zeitgeist, were those the same experience, or were they 2 separate experiences at different times?
Same exact moment.
Okay.
I mean, I never got into opiates because I started doing mushrooms at age 15. I don't do that anymore. I mean, like every now and then I may do plant medicine in a very like indigenous container, but only if I'm called to do it. I'm actually not called to do many plant medicines, just out of the blue because I feel the calling to do it. But yeah, that was a very interesting moment, because as I was watching Zeitgeist, I wasn't scared about what I was seeing. And I wasn't freaked out that, oh my God, this is the world I live in. I was so impressed of the artistry of this person. I was very impressed at the humility that I felt, because there wasn't a name attached to it. There was just zeitgeistmovie.com at the end. And I felt like, wow, it doesn't feel like the common movie with all these credits and calls to action and go to this website and help us fundraise. And it didn't have that kind of feeling to it. It really had that feeling like I put all this time and energy and soul and good music into helping you understand the world that you live in. So the mushrooms helped me actually kind of stabilize and not go into a fear mode, but actually see it for its artistry. Like, wow, you can do this. You can make a piece of art and just give it away for free. And so I did it, and I didn't actually expect any money from it. And people came to me afterwards and like, hey, can I chop up some of your film and put it on my page? Yeah, sure. Can I chop it up and put it into a film that I'm making? Absolutely. Can I just sell your film on my website? Yeah, sure. And I was a terrible businessman. And my parents were even telling me, trying to, in a sense, drag me back into this old model that you need to stop people before they get to your art and say, please pay up, or please sign this, give me your email address so I can build my email list. And to me, I was like, that's not what I did this for. And inadvertently, that led to a career that I couldn't help but take off. The band, I tried my hardest. There was so much effort, and the band was kind of just skating by. We were gaining traction, but not much, not enough to ever make it. I wasn't trying to make it as a filmmaker, and I couldn't stop the influx of people wanting to buy 1,000 copies at a time. I couldn't stop the influx of people saying, can I put you on tour in Australia? And you just come and do a bunch of speaking dates alongside Max Egan. And you know, all these other people that I was starting to come to be aware of. And I think there's a lesson in that, you know, like I could try and wrap words around it, but I think there's a lesson in that, that I wasn't trying to make something of myself. I was just doing what I love, making art and presenting it without feeling the need that you need to give me now something in return.
I think you just kind of mentioned the secret that they don't want to tell you at film school, or they might push away from, you know, that's not in the matrix of reality. You were mentioned when you signed that contract, you know, doing the numbers in your head about the band, but when you started making films, that wasn't even a thing. You weren't even worried about that, but stuff just kind of happened. And you had mentioned prior about serving, you know, your higher conscious or your higher self. And I think that is the lesson. And I just think it's hard sometimes when you're feeling that calm, but your bank account's empty, or you're not getting any return, or, you know, you're not getting any traction. It's hard to kind of keep on going and saying, man, I'm serving my higher purpose. Was there times where you had to lean into that? How do you think you avoided, you know, getting into the film industry per se, and being able to create your own lane and do these projects that inspire you, which in turn inspire everyone else who watches them?
Let me just make sure I heard your question right. How, like, maybe just say it one more time.
Was there any time where you kind of had to lean into that more? Or was it just organic, where you were just always believed, and it kind of just the domino effect, right? One thing kind of led after the other, so you really didn't have to worry about, do I have to get a real job, or this isn't going to work, or I have to go into the film industry and not work for myself.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was trying to understand, because, like, in a sense, people say I'm in the film industry, but I'm not like in a union. I just happen to be, like, now it's all through YouTube. Yeah, you know, like, I love being candid like this, because, like, a lot of people probably see what I've done with my career, and I kind of fell backwards into it without much effort. But that's not to say that afterwards I wasn't chasing the same kind of success from just like, oh, I should be able to just make any film, put it online, and there should be millions of views 6 months later, like the first few films. And that wasn't the case. It didn't keep happening. And in a way, like, as much of a blessing as that was, it was also a curse, because I found myself, even knowing, having all the, you know, the quotes in my head, don't chase past success, just keep moving forward, don't have expectations. It got harder. It got harder from that point. And I find myself, you know, now the industry has also changed, right? Like, I mean, back then it was Google videos. It wasn't YouTube yet. And, you know, there was something interesting about, like, right time, right place, 2007, 2008, 2009, people were eating up those films, and they were still buying DVDs. So I could print out 1,000 DVDs and they would be gone in a couple months. And, you know, sometimes they'd be gone in a couple days because people would buy 1,000 at a time. So it's a different industry now, because YouTube and all these different platforms that you can put your stuff up on, they're now starting to censor. There's other aspects to them. There's a lot more competition than there was back then. Back then, if you put in just a little bit of extra devotion into your film and you make it look, you know, better quality than YouTube or Google Video was looking at, then you would have this stellar film next to all these other films. But nowadays, you have influencers and people who had made previously 150 million, and then they just hop in and they can throw in $150,000 a month into ads, and it's a different game today. So I find that it is pretty difficult, and I find myself listening to. I listen to all the podcasts, like, how do you make a business out of this? How do you, you know, like, how do you stay true to your craft while also following some kind of formula that is scalable? And this is where my rebel comes in. I'll listen to all that stuff because I want to know and I want to be able to do it. But I find that all the tactics and all the monetizable avenues for being a filmmaker, there's an element of it that I just feel like, no, that is the epitome of what I would call a sellout. If I were to go down that route, I would call myself a sellout. And I would probably have to get really clever to find a way to justify it to myself. And then deep down inside, I would just keep shaking my head at myself. So what I found is it had, I mean, maybe it didn't have to be this way, but it's a hard road. I was at my wit's end right before Gaia picked me up, and they said, hey, come here and just be a filmmaker. I got a really good salary. I was there for 2 years. I made Psychedelica in this poster right behind me. I made 2 seasons of it. I made another show called Limitless. I helped out and I narrated a bunch of other stuff, and it was a great time. And I was like, is this what making it feels like? You know, now there's like, this is like Netflix, but it's the conscious version of it. And then I was like, yes, but it's still a corporation. Do I want to do this? And that was when I realized, like, Ben, like, you know, this is where your rebel comes. I started, my wife was pregnant with twins, and I was like, I really feel like quitting my job. And I'm living in Boulder, you know, like I already have a daughter, I have twins on the way, and I feel like quitting my job with a really good salary. And I talked to my wife, and she was like, listen, I think you need to do what you know inside you need to do. And I ended up quitting. And yes, we dealt with a really, really hard dark night of the soul for the next 2 years. But eventually it got back to the point where, you know, making film with Pete Evans, made this film with John Chavez that Joe Rogan and Alex Gray and Dennis McKenna and Graham Hancock shared out. That was called DMT Quest. Then Aubrey Marcus found out about me, and we did a film together on a darkness retreat that he did. And it just, there was this underlying proverbial net that would always catch me. And I still find myself freaking out about the numbers. Like, how am I going to make this work? I can project out in my head that in 4 months, I'm going to be flat broke at this rate if I don't find a big project that'll bring in the money. And in a way, I find that even when I just say, can I swear on this?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Even when I just say, fuck it, I don't want to do any of this anymore, and I give up, someone will just come and hand me an opportunity that I didn't have to seek out. So I'm not like, this isn't my advice to anyone who wants to get into the, you know, like, I'm not.
How
just
do you
saying,
stay
like,
so
oh, well,
synced?
you know, like, hey, give up and your dreams will come true. No, I don't know that that's the case. But what I do feel is, if I'm going to look at the law of averages here, I've never not been taken care of. Even when I was in my dark night of the soul, there were people that came to my rescue and my family's rescue saying, like, I just want to give you this gift. And I would say, I can't take that, because I just felt guilty for the spot that I put my family in. And they were like, I don't want anything in return. I don't want you to even feel like this is putting me out. Just take this gift, please. I had people putting us up, gave us a place to stay, and it never stopped going that way. And I feel like if I would have given up on, let's say, my dream, to put it that way, if I would have given up on my dream, other people might have given up on me too, right? If I would have just gotten into a construction job and then lost my construction job and then been shit out of luck, maybe people wouldn't have come to my rescue at that point. So I don't know where the hidden gem is in there, because I'm still figuring this out. I'm actually even at a point right now where the past 6 months I've been without a project, and I finally landed one with Tim Pool. And this is really awesome. But it caused me to just like, okay, how do I understand what this roller coaster is? Because when I have a project and I'm like, yay, life is good, you know, like everything's going great. And then as soon as the project ends, I start freaking out. What's the next project? Where's the next paycheck going to come from? How, you know, is this what the rest of my life is going to be? This feast or famine mentality. And really what I've found out is the most difficult places that this path has put me has forced me to accept new avenues that I never would have found had I just said, you know what, I think I'm just going to stay at Gaia, or I think I'm just going to opt out and go back to the military, or do something safe, or do something cushy. And what keeps happening is the more that I take a leap of faith, even though it's not practical, it doesn't seem logical, but if it's directly in line with, I know what I was put here to do. You know, I know I was put here to make music and or make film and to deliver that to the world somehow. And I know for a fact that's what my heart is into. And I know that if I were to leave that arena for safety, that deep down inside, I might have money, but I'll still be shaking my head at myself. So I really do feel like, for me, what's dawning on me, and it's continually dawning on me, is that, let's say, this thing's falling apart back here. Yeah. This is what happens when you can't pay the bills, right? They use duct tape for everything. I really feel like what's happening is I miss the forest for the trees. Like my life was never about trying to find a way to make so much money that I never have to worry again. My life is, I've never felt called to be and feel so secure that there's no stress in my life. I didn't wait, I wasn't born with this concept that like, oh man, I want to be on vacation for the rest of my life and never have a worry again. No, I wanted to do big things. I wanted to not impress people with art, but inspire people, remind them what they're capable of, to change the world in unorthodox ways, not in the orthodox ways of like, whoa, he made a lot of money. What formula did he use? That's not what that's where the rebel is like, fuck you, like, fuck that. No, like, I want people to wake up and acknowledge that there's nothing special about me. And in fact, I freak out about these things consistently. The only thing that I would say is different about me than some people is I can't say no to an opportunity to make art and publish it. I can't say no, because I could have been like, oh man, like I've never made a film before. I never made a demo reel, and I'm about to make a 2-hour film and put it out online. What am I thinking? Like, there's people who go to film school for years, and like, who am I? That thought never crossed my mind. What a blessing. That thought never crossed my mind. It didn't cross my mind until 2 films later, where I was like, holy shit. Like, how did I do this? How do I deconstruct how I've gotten this success? And I couldn't do it. I couldn't deconstruct how I got to that level. And that was when the panic started to set in. So hopefully one of you two can make sense of that.
Well, I think it comes back to having absolute belief in your passion, and that's the net. That's kind of what I'm getting out of it. You never gave up on your dream, so the universe never gave up on you. I know that's kind of simple, but that's kind of how I picked up on that. And you had mentioned doing a bunch of different names, people who have promoted your projects, people you've worked with, and going down these different avenues for meeting these people. With some of the projects you've done and some of the people you've interviewed, what project kind of sent you down a different path, or what kind of interview kind of sparked you to get you to think in a different way, or sent you down a different way to another film? Was there anything that you've done throughout some of your projects, your interviews, that have really kind of changed your trajectory towards things?
Yeah. So as far as like what leads to the next film is always just chance. I rarely have ideas for films that I want to execute all on my own anymore. I usually have people coming to me, and like, I always have people pitching films to me. And usually, to be perfectly honest, like 9 times out of 10, it's films that sound exactly like the films I've already done. And to me, that doesn't turn me on. It's when somebody comes up to me and says like, man, I just want to make a film about walking, the art of walking. And I'm like, damn, that's cool. Like, that sends me off on a new path of like, it does what psychedelics did for me originally that opiates never did. Opiates always did this, which is cool. Sometimes you want that. But psychedelics always did this. It opened up my mind to new opportunities. And when people pitch me films that sound like my previous films, I'm like, I feel like I've already done that. Like there's nothing enriching, like on a personal level, there's nothing enriching about that. So usually it's when people surprise me with what they offer me. Like, hey, I want to make a film about this. And it's so off the beaten path. And I'm like, whoa, like this one guy, he wanted to just take me. I have a lot of people offering me to go to their festivals or their workshops. And this one guy, he just said, yo, if you ever want to go fly fishing up at Glacier Park in Montana, I'll take you. And I was thinking like, that sounds so out of the ordinary for me that I want to do it. So to me, like, perhaps that's something that, you know, listeners can feel into, is like, take the road less traveled. Another thing is, you know, never treat two films the same way. Yes, a formula emerges that can make the process easier, but I don't feel like filmmaking is about efficiency. You know, I've met some people that are like, you know, oh, here's how I'm doing films now, but eventually I want to delegate to the point where I barely have to touch it, and you know, they're doing all the work and I'm making a good cut off of it. And it's like, well, hopefully that's not what's driving you to make these films, is just making a cut while other people make the films, because that's a business venture, sure. And if you want to consult in a way, that actually is a business model, I get it. But if that's the core driver, then maybe there's something missing. To me, let's say I was making the Aubrey Marcus film, and it was all about, he did 6 Days in Darkness. And, you know, a previous filmmaker tried their hand at it. And admittedly, he'd never tried to ever make a film before. And so I saw the film and I gave him props for it. And I was like, listen, for somebody who's never tried to make a film before, you know, I think you gave it your all and you did a good job. What was missed was, it was too many people talking about darkness, and it wasn't leaving the audience in the darkness. It didn't give the audience a real glimpse of what it would be like to be in darkness. And then it dawned on me, like, that is the interesting thing about where I want to take this film, is like, how do you make a film about darkness? Do you know, actually leave the audience with a completely blank screen for long periods of time? And my thought was like, yeah, I think you have to do that. You know, so audio, like the sound design, most people don't give enough credit to soundtrack and scoring and sound design, because the ears and what you hear forms in utero before the eyes. And there's something more primal about what you hear, and it's also more subconscious. Like, oftentimes we watch a film, we remember things that we see and maybe concepts that we hear that tickles our intellect, but the sound design, we just pass it off. It's just part of the movement. But that's like the emotion. That's the emotional roller coaster that's like telling the subconscious, this is how you're supposed to feel about what you just heard. You know, so like, I mean, and prime example, take that moment in Interstellar, if you saw that movie with Matthew McConaughey, where he goes into outer space and he's traveling through this black hole. There's this really touching moment where he traveled, his daughter got older than him because he's traveling faster than the speed of light, and he's watching this video and he's crying. It's super touching moment. And my example is like, what if the YMCA, like young men, like what if that was going on at the same time? You couldn't get the audience to cry, right? The whole point being was I realized I have to do something unique with this part of the film. So it was all about sound design. And then there was this one part of the film. It was a 1 minute and 44 second part of the film that I didn't even think was going to be the climax. But I just started messing with it. Aubrey Marcus was just like speaking for God. He was delirious. Like you could tell he'd been in there too long. And he was just like, I made God laugh today. I said, I love you, God. And God laughed. And, knowing that I'm God too. And he just said, good. And he just moaned the mantra of good over and over again. And to me, as I was listening to the audio, I was like, he's delirious. This has to be in the film. But I didn't realize, like, I started like, what am I going to, if I put something over this, it's like, I'm speaking for God. Like, what would you, as God is speaking, what would you see? And I was like, if I can't, it's like God is everything philosophically. So I have to show you everything. How am I going to do that? So I literally, every single frame, there was a new image, and it was moving super quick, 24 frames a second, new image. But there was an evolution, like all the eyes stayed in the same spot, and it was people and animals and, historical photos. And then, like there was something was moving super fast, but there was something moving super slow about it. And there was an animation that I got inspiration from the McLaughlin brothers. It was called A Minute of Your Time. You can find it on Instagram. It's phenomenal. But I sat there for 3 months placing images frame by frame by frame and just like tweaking them and like making sure that they fit exactly right for this 1 minute and 44-second spot in this film. And I was doubting myself. I was like, this looks cool, but I hope it looks so cool that Aubrey Marcus is like, yo, this is dope. Because if he says anything less than that, I'm going to quit filmmaking, because I just spent 3 months of my life on this. And we screened the film in Austin, and Aubrey and I were sitting next to each other, and his whole crew, we filled up the theater and his whole crew was watching. And the moment happened so quick that people saw it and they were just dead silent for it, but nobody made a sound. And I was sitting there like, fuck, like this didn't happen. Like really, like it was just meh, right? It was just meh to everybody. And then Aubrey afterwards, he was like, dude, everybody who told me, they were like, that was such an incredible part of the film. You need to create more space before it happens, so people aren't laughing from the previous part, because they need to be so like waiting for the next part that once it hits them, they're like, and so he reiterated what I needed to hear. He was like, this thing that you took a 3-month chance on was the absolute best part of the entire film. So I guess to answer your question, sorry, that was a long tangent to bring it back to me, you have to take chances on things that aren't rational, right? You have to, like, if you have this impulse and this spark, you may have all these parts of your mind that's like, dude, that's stupid, or dude, nobody's done it. There's a reason why it's not done. There's a reason why nobody does it that way. But if you feel it, and if you feel like, no, but I have to try, I have to experiment with it, I say go for it. You have to take chances on yourself. And how many times you hear that even in business? Like, it's not a formula. You have to believe in yourself. You have to take chances. You have to do things nobody else in your position would. And sometimes you're going to fail. But sometimes it is that defining decision of believing in yourself, kind of like you were alluding to earlier. It's that defining moment of believing in yourself that really shows other people like, shit, how did you think to even do that? And some other people, you would imagine they would think about it, but they don't put the time in to actually realize it. Because every time we have a goal in mind and then we put the time in to realize it, once we've actually realized it, it usually turns out in a way that we couldn't have even imagined in our original impression of it, if we put the time and devotion in. So I guess, to simplify what I just said there is, challenge yourself in directions, like if it's film, doing things you never thought you would have done, and taking chances on impulses or ideas, inspirations that come to you that, I mean, if you're not battling inside, man, is this crazy or is this brilliant? If you're not battling with that at any point, then you're probably not scratching the surface of your brilliance. You're probably limiting who you are because of stories that you were told. You're probably blocking yourself from the path that deep down inside you want to take, because it's not monetarily viable in the collective. So I guess I'll end my rant there.
Is that something, Ben, that you've experienced with all of your project? Was it something that was like an added pressure because of, working with someone like Aubrey and kind of his notoriety within the community, or even maybe with the Gaia project? Did you have maybe added pressure from who those organizations or who those people were? Or do you kind of get, or do you hope to get that feeling with all the or you're looking to get that kind of feeling and sensation from all your projects?
I'd say the two exist simultaneously. There's always the pressure. To me as a filmmaker, and maybe this is a character thing, I wouldn't say a character flaw, but a character thing where I want to blow people away. If anyone commissions me to make a film, I want to exceed their expectations. I don't just want to cash out. Like, here's your film, You know, you satisfied? Yeah, I'm satisfied. Cool. You know, like send me here's my invoice. I always want to blow them away to where they're like, dude, I now know even more why I came to you to do it. But deep down inside, no matter who, whether it's Gaia, whether it's Pete Evans, whether it's Aubrey Marcus, no matter who commissions me to do a film, the goal is always to surprise and impress myself. And I'm a hard person to impress. Like oftentimes when I'm making stuff, even films that I'm making on my own or my YouTube channel, I put up stuff every single Monday. And there's often times where I spend 3 times the amount of time that I normally do because I scratch it and I go back to 0. I'm just like, no, this isn't blowing me away. And oftentimes I'm also pressuring myself, like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you have a family. You need to get back to your responsibilities and like quicken this pace. You know, there's a formula for a reason, so you can get better at it, so you can spend more time with your family. And to me, again, that violates that principle of like, no, like I'm here to devote myself to the art that wants to be born. If I don't feel like I really devoted myself, if I feel like, well, it's done and it's 5 o'clock, so I guess I'm going to cash out and go home. I do that head shaking thing at myself the whole day. I'm just like, I should just delete it. And I've done that before. I've done it before. I'm like, I've made something and I've just been like, you know what? I feel like just going and hanging with my kids. And it probably was the right thing. I probably needed to go and just spend that time with my kids. But then I ended up stressing like, you know what? I'm just going to go delete it. I'd rather not put anything up at all than something I didn't really devote myself to. So I've done that. And some would say that's overthinking it. But, you know, what's really the formula? You know, that's the thing I'd like to pose the question to most people who are trying to, at least in the realm of art. And I know it probably applies to everything else. But if it's just there for security, if you're doing what you're doing just for security, and if it's not fulfilling you, I think that's going to catch up with you a lot quicker. You know, to me, I feel like if you keep surprising yourself, that's by doing things that scare you. For me, when I'm making a film, whether it's for Aubrey Marcus or Gaia or whomever, I need to do things that even they think are a little crazy. And oftentimes I find myself like getting feedback from them, like, what are you doing? Like, where's this part going? Like, what are you showing me here? And oftentimes when I know, like deep down inside, dude, this is going to blow them away, I don't care that they don't understand it. In fact, I'd rather be that mysterious guy that is misunderstood, that they're like, dude, I thought you were going to blow it until you showed me the final product. And dude, I'm sorry I doubted you, and I'm glad I stuck with you. In many ways, like, I'd rather be that person than the one that, like, you know, dude, I never doubted you, and yeah, the film's it's good, right? And it's like, I never want that. So hopefully that answers your question.
With that being said, have you had to have, or has anyone you've worked with had to have that sort of uncomfortable conversation of where is this going, or, you know, maybe we need to go in a different direction?
Yeah. Pete Evans, he's a celebrity chef from Australia, and this was 2018 and 2019. We were working on this film. It was going to be about psychedelics because he saw my show Psychedelica. And literally a month before we started filming, he was like, dude, let's switch gears and do a film about cannabis. And I was like, okay. And to me, that was like this, I know he's serious about it, and I'm not going to take him on the 30-minute dissertation of why this is a bad idea. I already put all the development time into the other film, and we're just going to wing it. Okay. You know, and it wasn't like, oh, you're paying, you know, I was at some point, I was like, I know this will be good, but like, this is very unorthodox for me. And as I was editing the film, life just kind of fell apart for me. There was a lot of personal things. I just had my twins. They were hospitalized. I was bouncing around from house to house. My editor was put in jail 3 times consecutively for something stupid. basically he wasn't making enough money to pay his wife, who he was supposed to pay a certain amount each month. So he went to jail 3 times for several months. So I was stuck editing the whole film, as well as doing all the other dad stuff and all that. So I gave him the first draft and I was like, let me know, let me know what you think. And he was like, dude, to say I'm not impressed is an understatement, and he really gave it to me. And I was just like, I know it's not there yet. And he was like, I want to believe, but be honest with me, Ben, do you think I should just go to someone else? And at one point I told him, I was like, yeah, maybe you should. And I was about to give up. I was about to give up on filmmaking altogether. And these were 2 separate moments. Actually the moment where I wanted to give up on filmmaking happened before. And he was like, Ben, if that's really what you want to do it, but only do it if your heart is telling you, not your mind. So I stuck with it. And then later I gave him the edit and he was like, dude, not good. This isn't impressing me at all. And I was just like, listen, I'm going to keep working on it. If at some point you feel like you need to stop paying me, but I'm going to make this film for you. And that confidence, he was just like, okay. It changed his tune. We got off the phone. By the time I had given him the second draft, I had put some soundtrack to it and he was like, night and day difference. Thank you. I'm so glad you stuck with it. And like, I needed to hear him not believe in me, because I needed that moment of, you know what, even though you don't believe in me, I know where I'm going with this. Even though you don't see it, I know where I'm going with it. So I needed to be able to stick up for myself. I needed to, in spite of negative feedback, I needed to know that what I was feeling was what was really happening. I was making a good film, regardless of the fact that the financier was telling me, I'm sorry, if this is what the film is going to turn out, I don't even want to put it out. And it really cut me deep, but I knew deep down inside that's because he's not seeing what I'm seeing. I am seeing what I'm seeing. I'm not just fooling myself. I am seeing the film that I'm seeing emerge. So maybe I gave him the draft too early. So that's an example where, I was given some really difficult pill to swallow, but I swallowed it and I went through with it anyway.
Ben, a lot of things you're saying I can relate to, obviously on a small level, film school, small stuff that we do, but having belief in it, everyone around you being like, I don't know what you're doing. You're like, I know, I just got to put sound on this. I have this vision. I know it's going to happen. And you had mentioned a couple of times that putting sound is kind of something you like to do. And I'm going to assume, break one of the floor laws that floor agreements, that you like the music side because you come from music and that's kind of your power, or where you get all your talent from. What do you like to do the most when it comes to filmmaking? I mean, what do you said you had an editor go to jail. So what do you do yourself? What do you kind of distribute, and how do you look for crew people to work with? Is it kind of, hey, you can do this, or are you not working with people who aren't on the kind of same level as you are, as far as like consciously?
Yeah, all the people that come to me and offer their services, they're in the same direction. I don't find a hierarchy of who's more evolved consciously, but really what I find is we all have the same intentions, but some of us are farther along in their craft. And obviously me, I have close to 15 years of filmmaking and distributing films and doing everything in the film, from soundtrack to editing to color grading and all that stuff. I've made all the mistakes too. So to answer what I think I heard there was one of my favorite parts of filmmaking definitely is music, but it's fulfilling the void in culture. There's a void in culture, and Hollywood has got movies nailed, but even they lack in many ways, because sometimes when they overdo the formula, it lacks soul, right? It lacks the real, it doesn't pass the what if test. sometimes, or not what if, like the so what test. That's something that I heard one filmmaker make, like, is like, you can make a film that is edited to the nines, great soundtrack, everything. But if the audience is like, so what? Like, the message is what lands. So to me, it's the whole thing about filmmaking. Some films, it's the soundtrack. Some films, it's the editing, you know, and the real like precision of the editing. Sometimes it's just the message. I made this film with Charles Eisenstein called "And the Music Played the Band." It came from an interview, and it's free on YouTube. It came from an interview that I did with him, where the morning sun was behind him, and it just whitewashed everything around him. And to get him clear and focus, because it was a very impromptu interview, let's just say this, the shot looked like dog shit. And afterwards I was like, well, that's a throwaway interview. But then I listened to it and I was like, but he's saying brilliant stuff. So what I did was I picked the best spots of him talking that had the most character, where you're focusing on him more than, you know, anything else, because he's being animated. And then all the rest of the stuff I just covered, but I covered it in such a way that it moved really quickly. Like, I'm sure you know what stock footage is. You've seen stock footage, and a lot of the times you watch YouTubers and you're like, I've seen that exact shot in 20 other YouTube things. What I do is I go to the same spot for B-roll, for stock footage, but if I edit it differently, like super quick, you see this shot, but I don't leave it on screen for more than literally 1 second, or sometimes less than a second. It's incredible how quickly the mind picks up on what it's actually seeing. And if you move through stuff quickly, then you can show 5 different images of somebody looking at their phone, not just one, you know, for 5 seconds, but 5 1-second clips, and it hits you different. It shows you that, oh, everyone's doing this. If that's the point, that everyone's doing this, then maybe put 20 in 5 seconds, like bam, 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 bam. And it'll hit you differently. And I realized that, like, whoa, people just aren't using the resources to their fullest capacity. They're not utilizing some of this B-roll to its fullest capacity. So, like, I want to stay on point. My favorite part about filmmaking is surprising the audience with how you tell the story, how you get the message across. Because sometimes word economy, fewer words, and you let them ring out. You put a lot of space in between them, and you give it a lot of sound design, and you show really touching visuals that make the point land. And then sometimes is, no, just let the dude rant and show the dude in the room because he's so animated. And a lot of the times people have good interviews, but I'm just like, man, you could have done so much to... I took acting lessons one time, and the coach kept saying, you got to bring the colors out. Every word has meaning behind it. You got to bring out the colors of it. So when somebody's being interviewed, you got to enhance the color, proverbially, of what they're talking about. You got to bring the story to life in a way that nobody else would have thought of. And if you do that, then people will be like, dude, that's cool because I wouldn't have thought of it. Not like, oh, I can tell you put 2 months into that piece. There's a lot of editing in there. You don't need the audience to do that. You just need them to be like, whoa, you told the story that way. That's incredible. So the other part of your question was about people, like the crew, bringing people around me. It's hard for me to delegate because I've always manhandled my projects from development all the way to post-production, distribution, everything. It's been historically hard for me to delegate. And I find myself, now that I've done so many films, it's not about doing what I've always done anymore. It's like, now I'm doing a film, you know, with Tim Pool, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'm going to do that film some real justice, and I'm going to tell the story in a unique way. But another thing I'm going to add to this, me doing this film, is this is where I'm really going to learn how to trust people that aren't on the same level. I can't expect them to know everything I know, or to do what I would do as quickly as I would do it, or as efficiently as I would do it. But this isn't about me making the money while they're doing the work. This is about me learning how to be a leader. learning how to delegate, learning when they do something really good, being like, you did a great job. And when they do something that I don't like, is just like, okay, we'll get there. But how, instead of chastising them, how do I coach them into learning so they can be the best version of themselves, without feeling like, oh, they need to, I want them knowing that I want them to impress me, but more than that, I want them to impress themselves, because I know if that's their goal, to blow themselves away, that they're going to blow me away. I just know that. That's how it works. So to me, it's really, I look for those people that they refuse to do something mediocre, and they would rather forego self-preservation. They would rather lose money. They would rather do the irrational thing to blow somebody away with what they know is inside them, so they can bring it forth through this art. That's what I'm looking for. Because sometimes, I'll have people say like, oh, I have 5 years of editing experience and this, that, and the other, and I'll watch what they do, and I'll feel like it's uninspired. Like it's technical, it's precise, but there's no soul to it. And then I'll find somebody else who, like, it's super rough around the edges, but man, like I feel what they were going for. I live the moment that they were in, as they, I feel what they were trying to express. That's what turns me on, is somebody who knows what we're here for is to turn others on, is service. I'm serving people with my art. The moment that it becomes something that I'm just doing for money, fucking shoot me.
And is that one of those things, you mentioned at the beginning that you haven't really had the calling for working with plant medicine and stuff? Is that maybe like an initiation for the crew? Is that maybe you all sit in circle and then they kind of weed out, the good and the bad?
Yeah, I mean, that could work. I will say that a lot of people are gravitating to plant medicines.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I know it's off topic from what we were talking about, but I feel like collective consciousness is changing. And I do feel like plant medicines have their place. And maybe this is just a change that's occurring in me, but I feel like what I'm sensing is that people think the plants are doing the work, and it's not them, right? It's almost like in filmmaking terms, you think the formula or the school and the things that you've learned, the things that are rattling around in here are what make a good film. That's what helps refine what's in the heart to me. And it's the same thing. Like, I see people going back to plant medicine month after month after month. And I'm thinking, like, at what point do you realize that you need to do the work? That, like, yeah, I'm still being real rough with my kids, or I still haven't figured out my life. And it's just like, maybe doing ayahuasca for the 30th time is the problem. Maybe it's actually the obstacle instead of the solution. And maybe the solution is realizing that sobriety, I mean, we're always on something. I don't know if you guys realize it, but we're all on DMT right now. It just happens to be trace amounts. We all produce DMT. But I feel like the real challenge to some psychonauts is sobriety. Yeah. And I challenge people, whether it's plant medicines, whether it's their job, whether it's their family, whether it's like filmmaking, art, whatever. I challenge people to take the road less traveled, because you surprise yourself. You end up surprising yourself. When you do the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes increasingly harder. Neurologically, there's a science to this. And this is why neurofeedback is so good, because you can tell when those well-worn pathways are being overly excited. And if you only ever use that pattern, you're never going to get what you never expected. Miracles cannot occur when you only ever feed the same pattern, right? If you're only ever doing the same thing, you're leaving no room for miracles to occur. And I think that magic does exist. I believe in miracles. I really do. And I think they're much more practical and simple. I think we think these things, they must be so complex that only, like, a well-spoken person can put it into words. I think it's much more simple, because babies come out of the womb like looking like, you can tell they're seeing magic. You can tell this is a magical world to them. And I feel like we become cynical looking at the world as a defense mechanism against constantly violating what we know to be true, and having the world, allowing the world to tell us that we're less than who we really are. Like, I think the miracle is when people think you got to give so much effort, you got to work so hard, and it's got to be hard, you got to toil. I do believe there's a lot of merit to that. But sometimes it really is what I was saying earlier, is like, the miracles happen when you give up and you just say, you know what? I give up on 80% of the stuff that I've been doing, and I'm just going to make life easier. And then so many of these anecdotes that I hear from people are like, that's when the epiphany happened, or that's when I realized my real path in life was when I gave up on the shit that I was just running on the hamster wheels. By the way, there is a economic, or let's say a business entrepreneurial model to this. It's the 80-20 rule, which means you got to learn how to give up 80% of the stuff that's only bringing you 20% of the return, and focus on the 20% of stuff that's giving you 80% return. And without making it just like a business model, I think there's a lesson in that we try to control the outcome. We try to control life so we can control the outcome, but that's not actually what life is about. Getting the outcomes that we're expecting is not what life is about. If life doesn't surprise us, there's no such thing as miracles or magic in life, and life feels like a prison. It just turns into a prison, and then we blame the system. And I do believe the system has a lot of problems with it, but we end up blaming the system, being like, this is a slave system. Look at what they've done. I agree with a lot of that, but I think a lot of it is our mindset. We're not looking for miracles anymore. We're looking for safety. Just look at the post-COVID world. You know, we're bowing at the altar of safety, as Charles Eisenstein says. We're looking for safety first, when really, I mean, this is a Burning Man term, but safety third, you know?
Ben, I think the word for this podcast for me is going to be resonate, because there's a lot of stuff you're saying that is just resonating. And I was talking to Rich the other day about reintegration, about how when we first started down the path to psychedelics, it was kind of an afterthought. And the more I get into it, and I did Iboga 10 years ago, and I still feel like I'm integrating stuff a decade later. Yeah. And I think that is the most important thing. And we made a documentary on microdosing for ultramarathon and stuff like that. And, you know, that was kind of something that people, you know, look to us for, that follow us. But I feel like doing something on the back end with reintegration would probably be the most powerful thing we could do or put out there, because the daily practices that you get, the information you get on the back end is the most important. And there is no magic pill. Like you said, Ben, the magic pill is you. We could go on with you forever today, Ben. I have so much more I'd like to get into with you, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Real quick before we get into that, Ben, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You have Michael Jackson Thriller over your shoulder. I would love to hear the backstory behind that, because Michael Jackson was the first concert I ever went to in 1984.
Amazing. The story behind that is my brother has a record shop in Pennsylvania, and it's the first business he started. And I don't have a record player, but I wanted to get something from him, and it really meant a lot to me to like, wait a minute, I need to be very clear on what my first record is going to be. And Dark Side of the Moon came to mind. There's a bunch of records that I'm like classic records, but then I was like, I saw this and it stuck out to me because like, I don't know what it is. I really, it's, now I'm failing to find words for it, but I was just like, you know what? There's something about this record that's unorthodox. Because if you were to ask me what's my favorite record of all time, I wouldn't say Michael Jackson's Thriller, you know, or is that Thriller or is that bad? Yeah. I can't remember. Yeah. So I wouldn't have said this record, But when I saw that, I was like, no, this has to be it. So it was kind of one of those illogical, but definitely inspired moments.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ben, are you a coffee drinker?
No,
No. Do you ingest caffeine?
I do.
How do you ingest it, or how do you prefer it, I should say?
Rectally.
Boof it.
Coffee enemas.
No.
Hang out with Paul Check.
In all seriousness, man, Guayaki Classic Gold. It's this yerba mate drink, but it tastes like cola, and it's organic. I like Guayaki. It's way too sugary. It's a vice, but I do it. And because of that, I don't do just about anything else. I love the taste of coffee. I like green tea, but Guayaki Sparkling Classic Gold.
I'll look into it.
So you're talking about in the can, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's this.
Yeah.
It's not one of those big, thicker cans. It's slightly thinner. It's almost like the Red Bull size. And I should probably stop. So thanks for bringing that up.
Ben, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
Yeah. Usually it's how I set the tone in the morning. I try to meditate first thing in the morning. I don't always succeed in that, but my boys, they're 3, they're twins. I sleep in the same room with them. They always wake me up far sooner than I'd like them to. And so I'm always groggy in the morning. And I get downstairs, and the first thing I do is I drink a tall glass of water, usually with some lemon, some Himalayan salt, just to like rehydrate, remineralize, all that. But it's really more of a ceremony, because I take that moment to just set an intention, which is usually like, I acknowledge that today is going to throw shit at me that I don't expect. And my intention is to maintain composure of who I want to be, regardless of the external circumstance. Because I'll just say this, Maya Shatreat, she wrote The Dirt Cure. I sat with her. I've interviewed her. She's a friend. She said, I always take a look at, in any situation, at the end of my life, I want to be able to look back through my life and remove the external world. And if I can look at myself and how I behave and enjoy the way I look behaving, no matter what the external circumstance is, then I'll know I really composed myself. Because it doesn't matter if somebody cuts you off in traffic or is yelling at you or being really insulting and rude. It's a test. And your composure and how you maintain composure. Think of doing that to the Buddha. How would the Buddha act? And it's not that we have to be the Buddha, but, you know, like, there are probably many reasons why the Buddha could have said in whatever language, fuck off, you know, or go fuck yourself. But the thing is that, like, it's less about what gave you the right to degrade somebody or to fire back at somebody. And it's more about, like, how did you compose yourself? Where's the grace? So I always think of that, like, no matter what the day throws at me, while I'm drinking that glass of water, I'm just focusing on, no matter what the day throws at me, I will accept the challenge, acknowledging that it's a test of how well I can compose myself. So I just try and set the pace of my day and then stick to that throughout the day. There's many things I do with movement and diet and meditation and stuff like that, but I think setting the pace in the beginning of the day is probably the best one example.
With that being said, do you have a favorite movement practice?
Yeah. So here's my little shop. Outside is a detached garage, and I skate around on a ripstick. It's kind of like a skateboard, but it only has 2 wheels, and you kind of do this, like, you know, dolphin kind of movement. I'll skate around if I just need to, like, feel flow. Or I do battle ropes, or I do kettlebells. I spin poi, if you know what that is, like people spin fire. I'll do that kind of stuff. Or hacky sack. But really, I try to match the movement practice, and I do everything functional. Like, how does it relate to if you know what biotensegrity is, it's your body and all the fascia, the connective tissue as one organism. So how does it structurally as a human wish to move and engage with its environment? So I'll give it rich, nourishing things. Instead of like doing pull-ups on pull-up bars, I'll go climb a tree, because there's all this rich nourishment and it sends different signals through your body to your brain. And that's found to turn the brain on more. And also reverse Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases. So really, I think challenging the body in new ways rather than doing repetitive motions over and over again to burn calories is what I like to do. I find the challenge in it.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal your morning ceremony intent mantra. I like that for sure. What are you listening to right now? Music, audiobooks, podcast?
Yeah. Stick
You
Figure.
reading anything? Stick Figure.
Have you listened to Stick Figure?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I saw them live here in Nashville not too long ago. They're incredible. If I, almost for any moment of the day, if I want to feel a little better or if I want to dance around, because a lot of times if my kids are complaining, I'll put on music and I'll just start dancing and they just end up starting to dance along with me. Stick Figure for sure. I still turn on Tool quite often. I've been listening to The Killers, the album with Human and Good Night Travel Well. I'd say that's the one song that lately has been really hitting me. The Killers, Good Night Travel Well. I really get into the production quality, and if they nail it in the studio, I really get into that. So yeah, music. I listen to podcasts and audiobooks all the time, but it's really kind of haphazard.
Awesome.
Any more rapid fire ones?
One more. This might not be that quick of an answer, but I feel like we're in a good tree of trust in the safe haven. So maybe what got you to the game, or if something different other than the Zeitgeist. Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory?
Ooh, yeah. I'll say something about conspiracy theory. Like, I love the fact that so many people get triggered by it. And it's not because I love watching people get triggered, but what it is I sense something that I don't think they sense, which is if you're triggered by conspiracy theory, there's something in it that you feel like it may have merit, or you're just tired of people talking about it. But like, to me, conspiracy is not going to go away. Talking about conspiracy is not going to go away. And I feel like there's more archetypal, yes, I'll answer that question. There's a specific conspiracy I love the most, but talking about conspiracy, especially when I know people aren't into it, usually the way I'll say it is like, like your heart can go out to minorities or like, LGBTQ or whatever, like, minorities or groups that feel like they're second class or third rate or whatever. But really, it's the conspiracy theorists your heart should go out to, because we've always been looked at as the shittiest part of society. But if you go back to the tribes, who were the conspiracy theorists? They were the lookouts. They were the ones that couldn't stop looking out for potential danger. They saved the life of the tribe. Without conspiracy theorists, I think we'd be far more fucked. But I also acknowledge that people within conventional groups of thought, it's obvious that it irritates them, because it causes for them to wake up to things that they've just like, no, just let me group think. I don't want to think outside the box. Just let me group think. So I try not to push theories on people. But to answer your question, mud flood.
Yes.
Yeah. Mud flood and Tartaria. And I even really, I wanted, there was something romantic about flat Earth. Once somebody explained it to me, I don't really believe it. I still, everything that people have said about flat Earth, I can see where they're going with it, but it doesn't prove flatness to me. It just proves that how we conceptualize roundness, most people don't know what they're talking about. People who deny flat Earth, I actually think there's more of a problem with those people than the ones who think the earth is flat. Because like people are saying the earth is flat, everyone's giving them shit, but they're sticking to it. I'm like, bravo. Like, you're sticking to your guns. You believe it and you don't care what other people think about you. I have more mad respect for that than people who want to stick inside the safety of numbers. Like, most people think it's round, so I'm going to think it's round. How do you explain roundness? I don't know, but you're the crazy one. You know, to me, that's what typically happens. But have you ever seen No Trees on Flat Earth?
No.
Is that on YouTube?
I think so. You'll probably find it there, but it's not about flat Earth. It's about that a lot of what we would call mountains or mesas used to be ancient silica trees that were thousands of feet tall. And to me, like, I don't believe it, but here's the thing that I like about these kinds of conspiracies. It just gets me to think of like, well, what if there used to be trees that were thousands of feet tall and there might have been civilizations in there? What if the earth is flat? What if it's hollow? What if there's creatures we've never heard about in the earth? And what if it's flat? And the reason why nobody can fly on a private flight to Antarctica just to go vacation is because beyond that ice sheet, there's actually other continents that we're not allowed to know about. What if, like, to me, and that's the what if game that I think it's healthy, just like, psychedelics are to an extent. But then, like, I feel like it's healthy to have that balance between, you can go to those extremes and it's healthy. I think iboga and ayahuasca, they're healthy not because the thing itself is healthy, but by breaking out of baseline consciousness is healthy. So if you just think the way you think because you've always thought that way and everybody around you thinks that way, conspiracy can be good for you as long as once you break yourself out of that rigidity, you don't just spiral out into some rabbit hole into infinity, right? It's good to still, you can expand a little bit, but your center of gravity is still center of gravity. And the same thing goes with psychedelics. I compare psychedelics and conspiracy a lot because I think that they are tools to break out of rigid consciousness. And rigidity in consciousness is the reason why we don't experience miracles and magic. So conspiracy can cause you to be like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense. When you look at it this way, it just makes so much more sense of the world. It's not there to scare you. It's there to cause you to see that reality is not what you think it is. None of us really have it figured out. And psychedelics do the same thing. It's to break you out of consciousness. But sobriety is beautiful and community is beautiful. And I find a lot of people with conspiracy, they end up hating people who are just conventional. People in psychedelic realms, they end up not knowing how to relate to people who are just conventional. And those are my brothers and sisters too. People who, find themselves in the middle of groupthink, those are my brothers and sisters too. And I'll say this, probably won't get much, pats on the back from your audience, but like, I got no problem with Bill Gates. I got no problem with Fauci. You know why? Because I've never met them. I don't spend that much time thinking about them. It's just the rumor mill. And yeah, I can read stuff about them, but I don't spend my time worrying about Bill Gates or Fauci. I wouldn't say I like Epstein. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't say that I like some of these fellas, but I don't think conspiracy, I don't think the best use of conspiracy in my life is to find more people to hate because they ruined my world for me. I don't think that's what it's there for. And I think if it doesn't wake you up to love, leave it alone. If psychedelics don't wake you up to a better version of yourself, leave them alone. There's my rant.
What a way to close it out.
Yeah. Awesome.
What a way. What about Klaus Schwab and George Soros?
Oh, dude, I would smoke DMT with them any day of the week. Any day of the week.
Thank you so much for your time tonight, sir. It was a pleasure. I gonna have a lot of notes edited in this one because you had a lot of gems in this one. So thank you for taking your time to speak with us tonight.
Yeah, man. Thanks for offering it. Both of you were a pleasure to talk to. This was fun. And I love the 10th Planet apparel you got back there.
Yeah, my 10th Planet Oceanside Purple Belt under Gio Martinez.
Beautiful. Amazing. Right on. Well, keep in touch, man. It was a pleasure to speak with both of you.
Yeah, it was a real honor and a pleasure, Ben. I really appreciate your time tonight, and I'd definitely like to dig into the mud flooded Tataria and your time with Max and your thoughts on that and that sort of stuff, because that's kind of definitely what I love the architecture and that aspect of just the thing that the what if, like you said, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going, and I really appreciate your thoughts on psychedelics and conspiracies, and the fact that you said if it doesn't open you up to love, then leave it alone. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Beautiful. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, sir.
You too.
Take care. Be well.
Peace.